Auburn has added veteran center Avery Jones from Eastern Carolina. I believe he will be Auburn's next center. He has a ton of experience and has actually played college football during the 2018 season, 19, 20, 21, and last year. I mean, the guy's played an absolute ton. So a lot to like about this. It's funny. We just got done recording the episode and we ranked all of the incoming transfers. So his name will not be on the list when you talk about instant impact, but I believe he will certainly have an instant impact for the Auburn Tigers this upcoming season. I think just through the transfer portal, you have picked up 3 of your starting 5 offensive linemen, which is very, very exciting with Britton and Dillon Wade. It's possibly and probably your tackles. And now with Avery Jones being your center, you're pretty much there. I mean, there's just so much to like about what Hugh Freeze has done, and we'll kind of go into detail about every single transfer with the exception of Avery Jones. But a few notes that I wanted to share with you. Last year, Avery Jones played 852 snaps for East Carolina, including a 65.8 offensive grade, but here's the kicker. 78.7 pass blocking grade. There's absolutely a ton of things to like about this. So obviously you lose Nick Brahms. There's a ton of questions about the center position. And we were all kind of thinking, man, can Connor Lew possibly start as a center? And now he doesn't have to. This is the best case scenario. You have this guy come in, start and lead your offensive line for a season with other veterans up front, while you've already got a pretty good recruiting class on the offensive front. Let those guys do their thing. Let the younger guys learn. And then all of a sudden, you've got these redshirt freshmen or true sophomores, depending on how Hugh Freeze wants to do the whole roster management side of things and how much you want them to play. And all of a sudden, you're set for this year. You're set for following seasons. This is a win-win for everyone involved. So once again, we recorded the bulk of this show. Then minutes after Avery Jones committed. We'll discuss him in the coming days, but the big picture is instant starter at center for the Auburn Tigers, and allows you to kind of have a bridge of him being the starter and then somebody coming behind him in the following seasons to get that experience. Huge win. Let's get into the rest of the show.
Freezing temperatures are likely for several hours inland and a few hours closer to the coast.
Yes.
You are Locked On Auburn, your daily podcast on the Auburn Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, welcome on into Locked On Auburn, your daily Auburn Tigers podcast. I'm your host, Zac Blackerby. Thank you so much for making Locked On Auburn your first listen every single day. Happy War Rapport Wednesday to all who celebrate. Mike G is back. Good to have you, buddy. And we'll get John Garcia's thoughts on the newest commits from the high school ranks, Tyler Scott and Cia Johnson, later in the show today. But Mike G, I've got a list. We'll go from most impactful, immediate impact. We'll talk immediate impact, 1 to 9. As we sit down to record this, there are 9 incoming transfers midday on Tuesday. And you ready to jump into it?
Yeah, let's go.
All right, I got Britton having the most impact on this roster. I think Britton has a chance. The former Western Kentucky tackle has the ability to just change this offense. Not only is he an incredible tackle, and I think he'll be the best offensive tackle Auburn's had since Greg Robinson, which is high praise, but I also think him being at left tackle will allow Dillon Wade to excel at right tackle. Maybe you can scoot somebody in from tackle to guard like an Xavier Miller. Regardless, I think it's going to allow you to have more position battles at the other 4 spots, which is encouraging because you need as much competition and as much reason to get better as possible on that offensive front.
I agree with this one. Listen, Auburn is recruiting offensive linemen, Zach. Who knew this could happen?
There's 9 coming in.
Who knew this could happen, right? Fans have been clamoring for this since Brian Harsin hit the Plains. Gus was doing it poorly before, and Hugh Freeze has attacked this position with, a viciousness. I'll call it a viciousness that Auburn has not seen. So for Gunnar Britton, I think, having not only talent come in at offensive tackle, but experience is super important for Auburn. And now the offensive line shuffle has killed Auburn over the years, right? Yeah. Moving one guy to this position and we'll try this guy at center and everybody's out of their natural position. I think it's killed them. Bringing Gunnar Britton in, I think, will help kind of bring a guy in who's a natural tackle. Let other guys be natural at their positions as well. Big pickup for Auburn.
Yeah, and then the number 2 guy, and I think you have to have this conversation, including both of these guys, Dillon Wade, the former tackle from Tulsa. I mean, I think I'm with you. I mean, to an extent, you want the right 5 guys, but the best 5 guys aren't always the best unit, right? I mean, if you've got guards playing tackles, but he's one of the best 5, that's not necessarily the best thing that you want. And that's kind of what we've been seeing since halfway through the Gus Malzahn era, right, Mike G? And so that's something that we're going to have to that we're going to get to see kind of take shape. And look, if you go into spring with Britton and Wade as your bookends, all of a sudden you feel good about what's going to happen in between them.
Yeah, absolutely. Dillon Wade, also a big pickup. Now, again, at the tackle position, Auburn's going to need some help. There was a lot of attrition in the offensive line after this year. You had some guys transfer out. You got a lot of talent. Auburn was hurt by Brahms not playing the season.
Sure.
And bringing in, again, 2 tackles from the portal. Now, you and I have talked ad nauseum about the portal. Hugh Freeze talked about quick turnarounds. And to achieve a quick turnaround in the situation with as many open roster slots as Auburn had, getting tackles out of the portal was going to be important. Bryan Harsin couldn't do it for some reason. He couldn't get guys. I was like, are there not guys out there? Now, I don't know how these guys will pan out, Zach. I have no clue how these guys will pan out. So this will be mark my words, this is going to be one of the most anticipated springs because of the guys like Dillon Wade and Gunnar Britton that they're bringing in to see how they protect the quarterback. Are they giving Robbie Ashford and
Holden
Yerner, yes, who I like a lot, right? The protection they need because they're going to have to play a different game when Holden's in, right? So, your left tackle is your most important position because you're protecting the blind side of the quarterback. All right, so you need a solid left tackle that you can depend on and trust if you're going to play at a high level, especially as a pocket passer.
All right, currently the 3rd most impactful transfer coming into Auburn. I've got Elijah McAllister at number 3, largely because I think there's a solid chance that he fights for that starting edge spot, and we'll see. I think it's going to be him or Keldrick Falk. So you either go with one of the more experienced guys on the roster that's played like close to 1,000 defensive snaps at Vanderbilt, to a guy that hasn't played a snap of college football. So you kind of get both ends of it, which is good for both the present and for the future at the edge position at Auburn University. But I like Elijah McAllister's size. I like that he's going to be able to be relevant in stopping the run as well as, he's not just a pass rusher. And I mean, this doesn't really matter, but we've had some luck with Vandy defensive transfers with Donovan Kaufman. So I got Elijah McAllister at number 3. Your thoughts on me putting them there?
This is a guy who actually played wide receiver in high school.
Wild,
right? Like he was 6'6", 215 playing wide receiver, and now he's at the edge.
Imagine guarding that as like a 5'9" corner or something. Like that'd be wild.
Insane. So I like Elijah McAllister a lot. Now, the edge position I'm iffy on. Now, I know you said that you think that he's going to push for a starting spot there. I've really liked Dylan Brooks for a long time. I think, toward the end of the season, you started seeing him getting in there. He had some batted down balls at the end of the season. But on defense, I'm expecting them to rotate a lot of guys. Now, I don't know if you remember, but when Coach Freeze was at Ole Miss, they had what they called the land shark defense.
Yeah.
And they ran around like this, and they beat Saban a couple times. But I don't know what version. I don't know the version of that defense. I don't know what the name of the defense is going to be this year. But getting pressure off the edge is going to be super important. It's something that Derek Hall did well. I believe. We can improve at that position as well this year. I think they can improve even in spite of the loss of Derek Hall, which is a huge loss.
Yeah, and obviously you lose Eku, you lose Marcus Bragg. I mean, that was when you look at the pressures that you lost last year. I mean, Owen Papo had several, and it's like there's just not a whole lot of pressures coming back to this roster. So that's a big concern, and we'll see if Elijah McAllister can help fill that void for sure. Yeah, and Dillon Brooks. I'm probably not giving Dillon Brooks as much credit as he deserves. He's got to fill out his frame, Mike G, and hopefully another year in an SEC weight room will do that. My number 4, and after this guy in the list, I think there's a pretty sizable drop-off. But my 4th most impactful transfer at the moment is DeMario Tolan, the linebacker from LSU. Spoke with Locked On LSU host Caroline Fenton, and you'll hear from her on tomorrow's show about DeMario Tolan. But this is a guy that LSU did not want to lose. And this is a guy, like, when you go back, and Caroline touches on this, you'll hear her talk about it on tomorrow's show, but Brian Kelly, when he was asked about the defense, like, he went out of his way to constantly mention DeMario Tolan. It almost kind of seemed like, you know, when Bruce Pearl talked about Jalen Williams at the end of the season last year, he's like, don't transfer. We still love you. We've got plans for you. And DeMario Tolan ended up, of course, leaving LSU, and they didn't want him to leave. And so I think that's pretty telling when LSU, I mean, they're recruiting at a pretty high level right now, and what Brian Kelly's been able to do. And, you know, they won the SEC West, and you get a part of that defense in the future of what they thought would be the future of that defense. I think DeMario Tolan at a position of need when linebacker's pretty thin, there's a lot to like. So I've got him at 4. I possibly could put him at 3.
Yeah, with the loss of Owen Pappoe, right? Like, you know, again, getting experienced linebacker play in is going to be really important. This was a unit that underperformed. Let's be clear. The linebacker unit underperformed. They were choosing the wrong gaps constantly.
Yep.
You know, they were not assignment sound. They made plays at times, certainly. So it wasn't like a talentless unit. But, you know, I would argue this is on defense. This is the position that needs the most improvement year over year is linebacker. Right. We'll see how bringing in the experience from LSU, you know, I think it's huge for Auburn, this landing. Honestly.
Yeah. They underachieved. Mike G. Owen underachieved. I think Cam Riley underachieved. Wesley Steiner, I think we all expected more out of him. Like, I don't think there's really anyone in the linebacker room where we're like, yes, they played at the level we kind of thought that they would. So I'm with you. I think DeMario Tolan helps you get closer to where that unit needs to be. All right, I think there's a big drop-off here from 5 to 9. I'll explain where I have certain guys and why. We'll get Mike G's thoughts on it in just a moment. But the next 2 guys, I'm going to kind of group them together. You'll see why in a moment. Today's show brought to you by our friends at Bet Online. Bet Online is your number 1 source for all of your betting sports info, stats, news, and analysis. It's the fastest and easiest way to get your betting info and everything that you need to wager on your favorite sports. Bet Online, it's where the game starts. Mike G of the War Rapport, welcome back, my friend. All right, at number 5, I have the defensive lineman, Mosiah Nasili-Kite, and I'll go ahead and lump in my 6th most impactful transfer for 2023, the defensive lineman, Lawrence Johnson. Of course, Lawrence Johnson from Purdue, Nasili-Kite from Maryland. Your thoughts on me putting those guys there? Depth pieces along the defensive front. You need them, but I don't think they're going to have a huge impact that really shows up on the stat sheet.
Yeah, I agree with this completely. You need depth, and keep saying again this spring we're going to see a lot from these guys. They have a lot to evaluate. I think Hugh Freeze has more to evaluate this spring than you would like to have on your plate. So, you know, with these 2 guys that you're talking about, it's going to be interesting to see where they land. To do one of them show out this spring, you know, how much competition is going to be happening on the plains is going to be interesting to watch during the spring with these 2 guys.
Yeah. And I mean, both guys have 1 year left of eligibility. So like, you love that they're coming in with a mindset of like, I want to compete. I want to be a part of an SEC program. We'll see what that turns into. I said this in an earlier show, Mike G, but sounds similar to the Morris Joseph situation when he came from Memphis. His stats were a little bit more explosive. I think he had like 8 sacks. He was coming in with 8 sacks. I don't think these guys really have that. So it's a little different of a situation, but still, if you could get 2 Morris Joseph type players out of this, I think that would be a huge win. At number 7, this may ruffle some feathers. I think the next 3 actually may ruffle a few feathers, Mike G. But my next one is the tight end, Rivaldo Fairweather. I have him at 7th. I think he will be a piece of the offense. I do not think he will be like featured necessarily, but there you go. I've got Rivaldo Fairweather, the former FIU tight end, big body dude. I've got him at 7.
Yeah, this guy, what a huge pickup.
Yeah, he can play.
Yeah, and you know what I thought? I thought instantly Evan Ingram played under Hugh Freeze. And this
a little different build.
He's a little different. He's bigger. He's bigger than Evan Ingram.
Yeah.
But like Hugh Freeze has been able to get the most out of the tight end position. This is a massively talented guy, right? And so this signing might be one of the most significant going into the fall, because the offensive system that they're going to be running is going. I feel is going to feature the tight end heavily, and having a guy like Rivaldo who can do it all literally. He's got pretty good blocking technique, and he can get out there and move some guys as well as catch the ball and get off. Man, I love this. This might be one of the most underrated pickups, even though he didn't fly under the radar. But I love this pickup.
Well, I got him at 7. Should I have him higher?
Yeah, maybe.
How far up do you think?
Maybe about 3 spots higher.
So you have him ahead of the defensive lineman?
Yeah, man, listen, Auburn has to get going on offense, Zach.
Yeah.
Auburn has to get going on offense. I think, the defense has been a concern, but, they played well in longer stretches over the last couple of years than we have on offense. And so having playmakers on offense for whoever's going to be the quarterback is going to be super important.
I'm curious to see how they use the tight end room and like what he thinks of the tight ends currently on roster. Like, we know he loves Landon King. I mean, it seems like they had a conversation, the heart-to-heart, the Evan Ingram discussion, which is great. But I'm curious to see if he treats Landon King as a tight end or a wide receiver when it's all said and done, or both, right? Or both. And I think that's going to impact Rivaldo Fairweather one way or the other. I'm cool with putting him ahead of the defensive tackles.
Yeah.
The defensive lineman. I think that makes sense. I don't know if I'm doing it, but I think it makes sense. Number 8, I got Brian Batty, the running back from the University of South Florida. Just because of the running back room, and I was talking with Lindsay on the Auburn Daily show yesterday, and Lindsay kind of pointed out all the special teams numbers, and I'm like, man, that's something about there's something about that that's definitely helpful too. When you talk about maximizing a roster spot or a scholarship in this sense, you get 2nd/3rd running back, also potential starting kick returner. There's a lot to like about Batty here.
Listen, I like the running back room. To me, is deep.
So good.
Yeah, it's so good, right?
It's 4 deep now. Yeah,
I don't hate this signing, but you do lose Tank, right? So bringing a guy in who has played significant snaps. Maybe I'll be interested to see again what kind of look they give him during the spring as well to evaluate. But I like Jarquez Hunter is my guy. Jarquez Hunter is RB1 going into the season. DeMario Austin, I thought, showed us some great things. Where does Brian Batty fit in this mix, right? Because you have some young guys that played pretty significant time last year, right? And so if you're DeMario Austin and they're bringing in this transfer, you're thinking, right? Like we're not playing this game, right? He's here, great. Now, if they're going to use him at a special teams capacity, if he's got other skills, I'm all for it as well. But I like Auburn's running back room, so I think where you have him ranked is right where he should be.
Yeah, and look, I think all 9 of these guys are going to contribute, and I think they're all going to have an impact. You got to put somebody at 8th and got to put somebody at 9. Batty had this is from this will be up on Auburn Daily for our stat of the day today. But Batty had 280 rushing attempts during his 3 seasons at South Florida. Jarquez Hunter has just 193 career rushing attempts. So by far the most experienced back. DeMario Austin's coming back with 14. And obviously Jeremiah Cobb hasn't touted the rock in college yet. So, I mean, he's got more touches than the whole running back room does. So there's a lot of value with that. All right, my last guy, and then we'll get to a conversation with John Garcia talking about Tyler Scott and CJ Johnson. But Nick Mardner, the massive 6'6" wide receiver, former Cincinnati Bearcat. Once again, I think he's going to have an impact on this team. And if he ends up being a number 1 wide receiver, or even a number 2 wide receiver on this roster, he is extremely too low. But just right now, I kind of like the fit of everybody else a little bit more than him. Just being honest, Mike G. Am I right or wrong?
I'm in between on this one.
Okay.
All right. It's hard to ignore a 6'6" guy who maybe does Auburn have a jump ball guy right now? If you had to name a jump ball guy on this roster, who are you naming?
It's a wrestle between Camden Brown or Landon King.
Right. So having the jump ball guy is not bad. It's not going to be bad. And maybe that's the role that he plays. Not just somebody who can go up and get a catch for you, elevate quickly. But I've liked Auburn's wide receiver room for a long time. I think that they've been underrated. I think the system has made them look a lot worse than they are in theory, right? And we haven't been able to get the ball to them consistently. So they're going out there and they're blocking. God, I mean, over the last 4 games of the season, we ran. I don't think it's going to be like that under Hugh Freeze. So this is another guy I keep stressing, man. They have so much to evaluate this spring.
Right.
They have so much. So they're going to have to go into overdrive, having eyes on these guys. I think you have him ranked right where he should be, dead last in terms of importance. Now, it doesn't mean that he won't have an impact or, hey, maybe he rises the depth chart somehow and is better than we think. But with Camden Brown, Jay Fair is a guy that I'm looking to climb the depth chart next year. He did some things at the end of last season. They just have talent. Camden Brown, good. They just got talent. They've got talent there, and I think Hugh Freeze is going to be able to get the ball to those guys.
Yeah, I mean, Amari Kelly, Coy Moore, Tarvaris Johnson. I mean, there's dudes on this team. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, let us know in the YouTube comments or in the Locked On Auburn Discord. You can it's free. All you have to do is click the link in the episode description down below. How would you rank these 9 as far as instant impact? Curious to see what y'all's answers are. Mike G, how can people give you some love, buddy?
Just go over to YouTube, hit subscribe. We're the War Rapport on everything. So visit thewarreport.com. You can see more of our content. We're cranking it out over there. So just go check us out.
Joining us now, recruiting expert John Garcia. Thank you so much to LinkedIn Jobs for being the official recruiting sponsor across the Locked On Podcast Network. John, since we last spoke, Auburn's gotten a ton of commits, but from the high school level, they've gotten 2 defensive backs, Tyler Scott and CJ Johnson. Let's start with Tyler Scott. Listed as a corner, could be a safety, 6'1", 190 to 200-ish, depending on where you look. But every article I read about this guy, it's the 3-star prospect with the 5-star offer list. What do you like about Tyler Scott?
Yeah, imagine that, right? Down the stretch, everybody in the SEC wanted a piece of Tyler Scott. He ends up picking the Tigers. Look, there's a lot to like here. You mentioned the frame. He is a college ready-made prospect from a physical standpoint, and that's just not something that you inherit in a given recruiting class, much less a transition class. And I think that combined with the athleticism, this guy lines up at safety, at corner, at nickel. He's pressing guys at the line of scrimmage as much as he's playing the ball 50 yards down the field. There's a physical element to his game from a run support perspective and a pass breakup, a ball arrival perspective that is really intriguing as well. 6'1" brings requisite length on top of all of that. So there's really a lot to mold here. And I think it's a good situation for him because with Zach Etheridge and that coaching staff, he's going to be able to get thrust in the mix if need be, but more likely be able to develop around some really talented defensive backs. I think once the technical elements get there, this could be a really impressive boundary corner. I mean, he kind of profiles like Carlton Davis a little bit. Don't want to put those expectations on him, but physically, those were some of the same things we said about Carlton coming out of South Florida. Big, physical, extremely comfortable at the line of scrimmage, and already well-versed in man-to-man coverage, which is not very common nowadays with high school corners. A lot of these schemes are very zone specific because, it's just easier to say, hey, go sit back and react as opposed to developing that one-on-one technique. But from a reps perspective, Tyler already has a lot of that in his bag. That's why he had a good week out in Texas at the All-American Bowl before he went public, at least with that Auburn commitment.
Can Tyler Scott be as physical as Carlton Davis? Because that guy would beat the crap out of people at the line.
There are some samples. I mean, watch the Tyler tape. There are some samples where he is pushing guys into their own backfield, theoretically, as well as out of bounds. So the desire to do so is there, and he's a little bit bigger physically than Carlton was. Carlton was probably 175, 180 coming out of high school. Tyler's already closer to 200 pounds. So there is a true physical element in that desire to embarrass you at the line of scrimmage, which we don't see as much from the cornerback position. That's something we talk about more with offensive linemen. They want to bury you. They want to finish you. There's some of that in Tyler Scott's game, and I love it. It screams confidence, and it screams, hey, we can shut down a side of the field before you even get your route going. So you got to coach that back a little bit and maybe not have him be over aggressive, but you would always prefer to dial it back than to gear another guy up to potentially look that aggressive.
All right, let's look at the other defensive back that's committed since we last spoke, John. CJ Johnson, the 3-star. Most places have him as a safety. Some places have him listed just as a DB, but 6'3", a little north of 190, similar size, a little bit taller. But what do you like about CJ Johnson?
Yeah, he really stands out on tape. CJ is extremely big, as you mentioned. The size really, if you stand out in Texas from a physical standpoint, you're pretty impressive in the height and weight department. But what I love about CJ's game is he really does play everywhere. I think with that size, when I watched the tape, I assumed I was going to see a lot of box stuff near the line of scrimmage, basically profiling as an extra linebacker at the high school level. But I saw him at corner. I saw him work the nickel really well. So I think that versatility that he's already shown is quite intriguing. And when you pair it with what his body might look like at the next level, maybe it's a hybrid linebacker safety type, an extra sub defender. Either way, in this day and age, Zach, you need these hybrid types who can work backwards, forwards, and laterally all the same. And CJ will profile to me in that regard. If you want to play the comp game there, think of a Smoke Monday, a guy who can really move around with length and physicality. You talk about a striker. He's really impressive at the point of contact at a defensive-laden, very well-coached high school program there in the Houston area as well. So a lot of boxes checked with CJ Johnson. And look, Texas is becoming more and more important for Auburn as this new staff kind of settles in.
Yeah, and as you made that comparison, Smoke Monday probably just got called for targeting somewhere.
Well,
so
aggression is a little different today than it was even 5 years ago. But you'll take it more times than not. Yeah, you do. This defensive back group for Auburn's pretty incredible. Kayan Lee, Sylvester Smith, Terrence Love, Tyler Scott, Colton Hood, J.C. Hart, C.J. Johnson. This group of DBs in this class, it's pretty remarkable. And you've got a little bit of everything, right? I think you've got some pure corner nickel types like a Kayan Lee, but then you got so many guys who you can kind of blend in between. Sylvester Smith could line up as a boundary corner, a nickel, or a deep safety without even blinking. And these bigger prospects, Kayan Lee's he's kind of the outlier. He's the 5'10" guy. Everyone else, I think, is 6'1" or better. So you're bringing in so much length and versatility on top of it that there's really a lot to like about this secondary class. And even more remarkable, it kind of came together pretty late in the game. Outside of J.C. Hart. It's all later additions, December, January type of additions and or flips. So really impressive overall what Auburn's been able to put together. But obviously from a volume standpoint, the secondary looks like it's going to be in good shape for quite some time. John
Garcia, thank you for your time as always, my friend. Thank you so much to Mike G, and thank you so much to John Garcia for joining us on the show today. You can find all my written work at auburndaily.com, and we'll see you tomorrow. This has been Locked On Auburn.